This is the Candidly Kim podcast.
Welcome to the Candidly Kim podcast. It is day 15 in the Utah Legislature, and tonight, I called Doran. Say hi, Doran.
Hi, Doran.
So I said we got a podcast because I'm ticked off. I'm ticked off. Like really. I gotta get some stuff off my chest, and let's do it in front of a camera.
I sense that.
Okay, but what's really fun is I have my favorite felon as a guest tonight.
Oh, cool.
So
I've always wanted to talk to a felon.
That
it was a misdemeanor.
Oh,
okay.
it's a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor?
that's not quite
You
cool.
got a presidential pardon for a misdemeanor?
I think I'm the only person in history to get a pardon for a misdemeanor.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
It
not
was a capital offense, though. So
because it would have implied that I have lots of felon associations to have one that would be my favorite. But okay, so not a felon.
Okay.
But anyway, what is
it's fine. I still answer to that. So
okay? What's super cool about this is he got a presidential pardon from President Trump, and so let's welcome State Representative Phil Lyman, and tell us about the area you represent.
I'm from Blanding, Utah. It's down in San Juan County, and my District 73, House District 73 is San Juan, Kane, Wayne, Garfield, Paiute, Beaver, and a little bit of Sevier counties.
So just as far as you can get away from Salt Lake County, just say it's as far as you could possibly get away from Salt Lake County.
As far as you can get. Yeah. And if we could get further, we would get further. So.
Okay, so also you've served as a county commissioner down there too, right? Right.
Yeah,
And there was a little incident regarding an outing, and something happened, and you made the news. Okay, so tell us what led to getting a presidential pardon. You had to commit a crime first.
Yes, that's the first requirement.
So what'd you do? Because we kind of know state lawmakers are, they're probably, they probably tend towards criminality, but you're actually one. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not. Okay, so what'd you do, Phil, Representative Lyman?
Well, there's a long story and there's a short version. So I'll give you the really, really short version, which stems back to the raids of 2009 when we had 300 federal agents in bulletproof vests and jackboots storm our little community of 3,000 people in Blanding and destroy the lives of 26 people. There was 3 suicides that followed shortly after. One of them was the BLM informant, and that creates some problems in a community. And it was BLM law enforcement Dan Love who was leading the charge on that, and that leaves a scar, and you try to get some resolve to that. At the same time, they were prosecuting 2 very innocent, very nice men for what they called illegal truck construction and recapture. We wanted to find out what was the damage, what happened. We want to know. BLM stonewalled this for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, and we finally said, you know what, we're going to have a protest. It was right after the government shut down in 2013 and a few things. So we had a little protest, and we drove our ATVs down into recapture. They had a big fit about it. So in advance, we said, look, we're not breaking the law. We're just going down to the end of the road, turn around, and drive back out, which we did. And the BLM afterwards contacted me, said, thank you so much. That was a peaceful event. It seemed very productive. I promise you we're going to come down. This is Juan Palma, State BLM Director. I'm going to come down. We're going to get this fixed, Phil. We're going to take care of recapture. I promised you I would, and I haven't done it, but I'm going to get it done. And instead, 6 months later, they decided, rather than fixing it, maybe we'll just charge you and 4 of your close friends with conspiracy against the United States, and they did. And I thought, well, that's no big deal. It's a county road, so we'll just go to court. one of my first attorneys said, take no comfort in the fact that you're innocent. This is federal court, and it makes no difference there. I thought he was kidding. I found out he was not kidding. And so for example, again, this is really the short version. Before the trial started, the judge gets up, a federal judge, and says, I've already determined this was a trespass. Our only purpose here is to find out if it was criminal. And I slap my hand on the desk and says, well, let's skip the trial and just go straight to sentencing. I mean, why do you need a trial if you can already determine that it's a trespass without even looking at the facts? But that's what they did, and that's what, anyway, so I did 10 days in jail and then paid off all my fines and thought, you know what, President Trump is, if he leaves office soon, or if he's in for 4 more years, I'm going to send in an application. And Mike Lee took it up, Senator Lee took it up, and Jason Chaffetz helped me, and Dan McCay, Senator Dan McCay jumped in and kind of pushed it across the finish line, and a lot of other people. Mike Noel was on my side. It just felt like, you're not going to get it if you don't ask. So I sent in the application, and I got a pardon. So.
And so I've never known anybody with a presidential pardon. That's pretty unique. And so does it come in a letter, a certificate? What does it look like?
I wish I had it here to show you, but yeah, it comes in a large certificate with the big Donald Trump signature on the bottom, and I really appreciated in his pardon. He said, some selective prosecution, and basically said this should never have been tried in the first place. He said that verbally, but in the pardon it doesn't say, kind of like, we forgive you for your indiscretion and try to be a better person. It said this should never have happened, and that's the truth of it. So I appreciated it saying that in the pardon instead of, clemency and forgiveness.
So what is the effect that has on you legally? I mean, it's got to just kind of feel good, to have that pardon, and because and a lot of us know that you weren't deserving of a criminal penalty, and the trial and the fines and all the things that happened to you. But what does it do for you now? Anything legally? Were you impeded at all by the record?
No, not a lot. It was still it still is on my. I mean, it wipes it off my record. The misdemeanor. So things like when you go to the bank and it says, are you under any kind of, criminal? Do you have a criminal record? And this expunges that. It clears that up. But with the misdemeanor, it doesn't prevent you from doing anything. There was some discussion at one point about my CPA license. They let me know they're going to be looking into this, and it's like, well, it's a misdemeanor and it's not financial and there's no malfeasance here, and so they didn't take away my license or do anything like that. I can still vote. I can still run for office. It's not a felony. So it didn't do a whole lot, but the just getting that, and especially I'm a person who, I'm not ashamed to say, I really love Donald Trump. I thought he was a fantastic president. So getting a pardon from Donald Trump to me is pretty cool.
That would be cool. Okay, so let me ask you this, going to skip around a little bit. You represent an area that has, in addition to the story you just shared, some lands that are fairly controversial in the public policy arena.
Right.
So what can you tell us about that? And tell me what you're concerned about now under a Biden administration. When it comes to Utah's public lands, we've talked about this before on the podcast, that the federal government controls, almost 70% of our land in this state. And so we have a lot of BLM land, forest land, national parks that we love, these areas, but more recently, some designations of just incredibly huge, unprecedented sizes of national monuments. And some of that's in your area, right, that you represent? So what can you tell us also, kind of briefly about that history, and what are you concerned about what happens now under a Biden administration?
Well, yeah, I'm always concerned with what the agencies are doing and the administration is doing. But Bears Ears National Monument is in San Juan County. Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument is in my district. So when Trump came out and downsized those, I mean, it was really cool that he downsized Bears Ears, because Obama did that at the last, in the 11th hour. But then, 25 years earlier, Grand Staircase had been designated, and he not only reduced Bears Ears, but he reduced Grand Staircase. So creates lots of controversy. One person here recently asked, before Biden was elected, said, if Biden gets elected and he reestablishes the monument, will you see that as a defeat? And I said, no, the defeat happened in December of 2016 when Obama designated it. Everything after that has just been trying to clean up the wreckage of that. It's a national monument. Executive order is such a bulldozer. It's a bull in a china shop. It doesn't care about any of the work that's gone into it. And so the fact that Obama does it, Trump tried to fix it, Biden's going to come back in and do it twice as hard, and all of it's about people far removed from San Juan County and from Escalante and those areas. It's all about a big national debate, and we end up being collateral damage. And I really do genuinely kind of resent the disregard that they have for what this does to a community and the people that live close to it and are affected. We don't get to make the decision, yet they want to know, how do you feel about it? And when I was a county commissioner, I said, you're gonna just create all this contention and do whatever it is you want to do in the first place. And anyway, I'm rambling, but that's Bears Ears and Grand Staircase.
So what do we, those of us who don't live in the way far away of the state, what do we need to know about this, and why should it matter to the rest of the state?
Yeah, it's really big. This is a really big country.
Really big. Really,
San Juan County is huge. It's a huge county, and Kane and Wayne and Garfield are big counties, and there's room for a reasonable national monument. There's room for outdoor recreation. There's room for extraction. We don't trip over each other. There's room for cattle. There's room for everybody to do what they want. And if the state would, act a little bit more like a state, we would do smart things there, and it would be a really beautiful place to live.
Okay, what does that mean? What did you just mean? If the state would act more as a state, what does that mean?
I mean, there was a reason why our progenitors wanted statehood. It actually meant something in 1896. Otherwise, just stay a territory. If you're fine with the federal government mandating everything that you do, just stay a territory. Why would you want statehood? Because statehood gave you jurisdiction. You can look on a map and find Utah because it's got this border around it, and I always say that border means something. It really does. Even though the federal land is inside of it, there's still this jurisdiction, and that was statehood, gave us a Republican form of government, a guarantee of that. Meaning that we have a say over the land within our boundaries. Even the federal land within our boundaries, it's got this jurisdictional element that the state somehow seems content to, to defer to the federal government. They say, oh no, you don't have any rights, you don't have any authority. They just say, oh, dang it, all right. And then the next thing goes, and pretty soon you find yourself, I don't know what the state means at this point.
Well, I think more than ever, the state needs to be strong. And so having just spent 6 years in the Utah Legislature and, watching what's going on at the federal level, and I just think more than ever, states need to recognize their role and their rights and their sovereignty and the whole notion of federalism that so many people don't even understand what that means. But you're one of our strong proponents of federalism, still left in the legislature, more than ever. And so for people maybe who have been concerned about what the federal government may do in the next 2 to 4 years or 8 years, remember that our government was not created to have a big, heavy hand of the federal government. They don't run our lives. And so all the more we need to find those lines, those balances, and those checks that our state governments can have. And we haven't always been really strong on that. And but we may be tested.
Well, it's the federal government want to control us. They want to control the land. They want to control everything.
Well, it's because they're good at it, Phil. Let's be honest. It's because they're so good at it.
Well, they're so smart, you know.
And they're smart.
Smarter. I mean, if you're in D.C., you're obviously smarter than someone that lives in Utah. That has to be a.
Well, that's a given.
And if you're in Salt Lake, you're definitely smarter than people who live in San Juan County. So
Exponentially.
Once you establish
more.
all that, then it starts to make sense as why people should never be in charge of their own backyard. It just
No, you of all people, you need a little bit of regulating, because if we really trusted Phil Lyman to govern himself, his home, yeah.
Well, that really is kind of the narrative that they would like to portray. That see what kind of a person Phil Lyman is, and it's really.
I don't really mean that personally.
No, but it's really important. It's really important to the left to undermine, discredit, defame, disparage, and nobody does it better than up here on the Wasatch Front with some of the mainstream media people. It's astonishing how concerned, how interested they are. I think it was on the front page of the Trib during that whole thing 50 times in 1 year. And it's like, who cares about Phil Lyman? Who cares about this? I'm just a commissioner down in San Juan County, but it was this, I became this symbol of, I don't know, kind of Bundy-esque or something, and it's not something that you're ashamed of, but they make a cartoon out of you, and it's effective. I guess I'll say that. It's very effective what they do. And they change the narrative that way.
Well, I was excited when you were coming into the legislature because you were a little bit legendary as a freedom fighter and someone who had the courage to push back on the rights of a community, on the rights of the states, and do the right thing as a county commissioner to ask the right questions. So we sometimes lack that kind of courage, and so I was maybe a little bit politically starstruck when you came into the legislature, and I thought, okay, you're a personal hero of mine already. So and I know you. I've gotten to know your heart and your mind and how you think, and you're a true patriot. You're not crazy. You're not crazy.
No,
I don't know.
I'm truly not. I'm very deliberate about what I do, and really, I guess, kind of committed to seeing something through. And yeah, it's not crazy. And I've had my own observation and experience that informs it, and it's hard to explain it sometimes. But I have to say, when I got the phone call from Representative Roberts saying, "Hey, can you come to breakfast with Kim Coleman?" I was sitting there, and we're talking, and I'm sitting there thinking, I am so intimidated. Here I am, I'm sitting here with Kim Coleman and Mark Roberts, and I'd seen you guys on the legislature, and I didn't. And then you said something like that. I can't believe I'm having breakfast with Phil Lyman. I was like, oh, I'm the one that's like starstruck here. I was
that is like political nerddom. I mean, totally. We're just like, sitting at that table. Yeah, I mean that.
Right.
That was a powerhouse conservative table right there. Because so a couple changes in the legislature, a lot of changes in the legislature. It's been a very, very frustrating last year for me as I watched, I mean, COVID in and of itself, but as a state legislator, duly elected, and I served clear through the end of December, of course, but why we did not call ourselves into session and make policy for this state was so frustrating to me, day after day after day. watching the inconsistent policies, watching the common sense out the window, watching just the craziest things. But to me, and if you watch my podcast or even when, as I was running for Congress, I talked about this constantly, separation of powers, how absolutely critical that is to keeping checks and the balance that we have to hold those branches of government in for one reason. For one reason. We didn't, our founders didn't create all these different branches of government because it would be easy, or because we just want to have more people and more seats. It was, how do we control the tendency of government to grow itself and in power over you? And the word we use is tyranny. And I've also been mocked in the media for calling the governor a tyrant, for saying that he's tyrannical. But that is the definition truly that our founders hit on, is tyranny is when government becomes so powerful that it controls your life too much and it removes choice and freedom from people. And so separation of powers, we have that in our state government as well as our federal government. And it's our obligation. It was our obligation as a legislature to exercise our powers as a separate branch over the governor. But the governor consistently took ours. He took our power. But the legislature let him. I mean, he can only do that if we let him. And we let him. What do you think about that, Phil? And tell me now. Now you're back in session. Are you going to fix it? And what's it going to look like?
Well, let me ask you the question. Why do people who feel so passionately about engaging in the legislature and they really are patriots, they're passionate, why do they find themselves stepping into the same rut and making endless rules and passing endless new programs when they're conservative? I mean, and I'm even saying this about myself. I've got a friend here that just got on the legislature, so he's ultra conservative, and he was always kind of beating me up. Why did you vote for that? And it's like, oh well, I don't know. Things come fast in the legislature, and you're moving so quickly, and now that he's here, he's feeling the same thing. He's on social services committee, and all of these things they want, and then the people demand Medicaid expansion. They demand this, and so I said, hey, bottom line is we're going to spend $22 billion. As repulsive or repugnant as that is, we're going to spend this money, and next thing you know, you're kind of part of the problem instead of part of the solution. I mean, that sounds like kind of a weak answer, because I want to do something, but it's so much easier said than done, I guess.
Well, I think you and I are less of the problem than some people in there. Honestly, but that is part of it. Some of it just happens fast. Some of it you don't always get accurate information. I found as a legislator, sometimes I didn't even know about most of the bills that were happening because they were in another committee. And the way I heard about them is through the news or through a constituent that would say, hey, what are you,
Right.
what are you going to be, where are you going to be on this bill? I'm like, oh, wait, you guys tell me a little bit more about it. And sometimes there's just so many legislative tactics that pull at the members to vote certain ways. And there's a bill that came out today, and I'll say this is probably the one that got my juices going today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, did you see my post?
Oh, yeah.
So there is so I have a mentor who has a prime directive, and his prime directive that he's just reminded me like daily for a decade is, if it feels good, don't say it. But I may have violated the prime directive today. But a bill came out today that I don't even know if you've seen it, Phil, because it's new. And it's possible maybe you haven't seen it. But seriously, this bill will have executive branch emergency orders become ineffective if we get almost 2 million vaccines. And it's like 1.7 vaccines or 1.7 million vaccines and or proof that you've had COVID and recovered from it. Okay, how many people, I mean, I don't have a number, but I know tons of people, they know they have COVID, but they didn't go get a test or they didn't go get treatment. So what's going to happen is, how do we get to the 1.7 million? It's going to require people who clearly had the disease to take it or to get the vaccine. And to get to 1.7, there's got to be some kids in that number. And so this one has my blood boiling, because the first thing it said to me is, this doesn't fix the problem of a runaway governor and a runaway health department that it has exceeded their authority, has exceeded statutory a 30-day limit. This doesn't address at all that the legislature should have the authority and does have the authority. So why in the world would we give that authority away for a number of vaccinations? Be the dang legislature and do your thing. Do your responsibility as the legislature. You rein in the executive branch. You exercise your check on the executive branch. We don't have some arbitrary number of vaccinations plus cases cured of COVID to relieve the governor of those executive orders. What the freak is going on up there, Phil Lyman? Representative Lyman?
So someone looks at a problem. Well, we have a problem. We've got an executive order sitting here. And if we want out from under it, we need to hit these marks. So let's go do that. Let's go hit these marks. You don't go back and say, wait a second, why? We don't have an executive order. He doesn't have the authority to do that. And I'm not trying to pick a fight right now with the governor, but I had a call from down in my district, and someone said it was about masks, and they said, how do you feel about the mask mandate? And I said, oh, is there a new mandate? They said, no, it's the same mandate that's always been there. And I said, oh, well, it doesn't make any difference to me. I said, the governor could order me to do the Macarena every morning. It doesn't mean that I would do it. It blows my mind that people think, oh, he said we have to, therefore we have to. Where's the American spirit that says, hey, you're not the boss. You're not the boss of me. But somehow we've shifted that to say, we're conditioned.
It is. This whole past year has been so much conditioning, but yeah, probably didn't start with COVID. But but here's going to be the argument. I mean, here's what the argument is going to be. Well, but then we can open up businesses fully. Then we can send all the kids back to school.
Right.
Then we
Wouldn't
can
it be
get
wonderful?
rid of the masks. And if we only do this arbitrary thing that is so void of recognizing our constitutional duties and our separation of powers. And so it was sad to me. I mean, it was like it was a range of emotions. So I was like ticked off at first, but then I thought, what a sad state that we live in. That there is a legislator who was elected by the people who just abdicated the very thing he was elected to do, and said, I'm going to give up my legislative power and authority and constitutional obligation, and I'm going to give it to a vaccine number. And who's going to be counting those? And I thought, really, are we there? And what's kind of sad about it is will it pass? I mean, those can be compelling arguments in our time. I'm also concerned that we just expanded our vaccination registry. Why do grown people need a vaccination registry for an unproven vaccine, not approved by the FDA, that a lot of people are going to choose not to get? But we've created the registry for that. But here's what the discussion was in committee. Well, it's the government helping parents be able to track vaccines, because it's really hard to keep track. So Phil Lyman, can you think of another time where government maintains registrations and lists to be convenient for the citizens.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, across the board with driver's licenses and things, but maybe you're talking about historical references. But
Typically, if they're going to keep a list, they're going to use it against you at some point, including
right.
your driver's license and your
So,
car registration and your.
as you know, these things come out kind of in a benign. So it's like the vaccinations things. Uh, I don't know if there's an ulterior motive there. And I'm thinking, they already do that. I don't have to remember if I got a tetanus shot 3 years ago. I go down to the clinic and they say, "Oh yeah, looks like you got a tetanus shot or a shingles shot." So when that bill came out, I'm trying to find out. Okay, it's bad timing. Why are we doing this in the midst of COVID? But then you read the bill and you say, this isn't really doing anything. And then sometimes you find out afterwards, oh my gosh, it was doing a lot. And I don't know on this one. I couldn't see a nefarious undertone to that vaccination registry, especially after the amendment that came out and said, no, it made opting out even easier, so you don't have to do it. But most people expect if they go to their doctor, he can tell you when your last
Right.
shingles shot was or something.
So I think the concern is, like you said, why now? Why is that happening now? When we have a real active concern about, is the government, or just as bad, is the business community going to start requiring proof of vaccination?
Right.
And so there is that concern. So for that bill to come up in that context, and now the bill today. So I was kind of fussing about it last week that if we're going to expand the registry, that is a precursor to then making it mandatory for commerce, mandatory for coming and going. And today, now we saw the coming and going bill, and the 1.7 million vaccinations to fully relieve the executive branch of emergency orders. So that might be in a little bit of a, maybe I'm a little bit more sensitive about these bills coming through, but I saw a legislature that we did not act when we should have repeatedly and repeatedly. So we refused to act. We acquiesced to the governor, and now we're putting in these other things that I think having these concerns, they're validated by what is going on in the world and in our country right now. And so, we need you guys to protect us and protect our freedoms. But sometimes, you don't always look at that. But my view of the registry bill was, is this going to include COVID? And then will it be used against us? But what we're seeing is sometimes it's not even just the government. What we're seeing in the way of things like free speech rights and some of that deplatforming, and even I have a friend who just got suspended at work because he supported a certain past president, and that's coming from the private sector. That's not even government. So while we've been kind of watching the government and saying beware of government, now, we have some of this fascism that's just arising even in the private sector, and that's.
I've always kind of been a person that says if the government comes out and says, thou shalt not do this, you have to go do that, because if you've got the right, if it's stepping on your rights, it's like you don't have the luxury of saying, well, I would do it, but I just don't feel like doing it today. It's like, no, if they say you can't protest, then you have to protest. If they say you can't speak, you have to speak. You have to say you can't draw a picture of somebody in this position. It's like, but we're kind of getting to the point, and like you said, with the big media, the censorship and stuff. I mean, you're doing your part. You're speaking, but they start to censor you, or they start to shadow, block you on things. That's serious business. Now it's like the tipping point has tipped, and here we go. And I guess back to your question too, it's like we need to get to the root of some of these things. Yet, as you know, in the legislature, for the legislature to act, you've got to have a pretty good, you've got to have a majority or at least a pretty vocal minority that can sway the group. And sometimes you get in those positions and it's 3 or 4 people, and they do their best. And I'm not saying that I'm one of those 3 or 4 people all the time. Sometimes you can't pull it together. You can't get a special session, even though everyone's saying, why are we not responding to this? And you speak. Next thing you know, you're doing a podcast because you're so frustrated because you can't get your voice heard, or you do a referendum because you feel like people aren't listening, and then they start ratcheting in, rails on people. I don't know. At some point, the people will say, "This is not working for us, and we're just not going to do this anymore." I hope it's Utah that says that to the federal government, but it happens it happens all the way up the chain. Families say it to their school districts or their school boards, and I don't know. That's a tough one.
Okay. Well, let's tell us real quickly about your bills. What are you working on?
Well, let's see. I've got one that's a fun one, and it says that there should be at least one representative per county, which seems really odd. But if you go back to the Utah Constitution, it says, no matter what we do in the future, there will always be at least one representative per county. That changed in response to some of the lawsuits back in the 70s and late 60s. But it didn't change until 1989 in Utah. We had one representative per county, at least. So the bigger counties had a lot more. And in my mind, if we're guaranteed a Republican form of government, that includes a bicameral legislature. And my argument is we don't have a bicameral legislature because they're all elected by the same people at large. Senate can open budget bills, and we can open Senate bill. I mean, so really we really have a one legislative body, even though we call ourselves a Senate and a House.
So this would impact redistricting this year after the census, is to ensure that there's at least one person, one senator in every county. Okay.
It flies right in the face of some Supreme Court rulings, and I've talked to some attorneys down in. It's one representative per county, not a senator per county.
Okay, one representative. Okay, got it.
At least, yeah. So we have the model at the state at the national level where we have 2 senators per state. So there's precedent for it, a good pattern there. But in Utah, it was always a representative per county, not a senator. I've talked to some of the attorneys, a few of them that have been involved with Utah, and they said, if this decision came before the Supreme Court, like it did in Baker versus Carr back in the late 60s or early 70s, it would probably be decided differently. But it's a question. It says, does the federal government tell Utah how to do their elections? Do they tell Utah how their legislature has to be made up? Is that really the function of the Supreme Court? Are they a super legislature? So those are really good questions. It gets down to down to the root of the root question, which is, well, why are we even doing this? Why does the legislature even convene if all we do is figure out how to, adjust to meet federal rules or executive branch rules? So that's one bill that I've got. I've got a bill that's dealing with it started out as calling the interbasin water consent agreement. So if 2 counties are in the same basin for water, one of them can't say, "Oh, we've got the rights," and they just pull out all the water from underneath the county next to them. And that's turned into kind of a resource management plan question of,
because there may be a story there.
There could be, yeah.
There could be. Actually, I think that's a very interesting story. But you said water bill, and you lost everybody right there, because I ran water bills.
Did you?
Nobody cares, except
as long as they turn the faucet and water comes out, they don't care. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I'm just kidding. But I did adopt the expression that friends don't let friends run water bills. So that tells us a little bit about your social life, Phil, and about mine in the last 3 years that I ran water bills. But mine were dealing with municipal water, and then you've probably got a lot of agriculture water, and and
Yeah,
resource water.
and so it's kind of evolved from just water to development. That
Right.
if one county is going to do a development that affects the resource management plan of a neighboring county, then they don't have to get permission and they don't have to get agreement, but they're supposed to give them a heads up. Hey, this is coming down the pike, and if you want to contest it, you should know that this is happening. Instead of like sneaking it in and saying, "Oh, too late. We got your water. There's nothing you can do about it." Anyway, that's a good bill for counties, especially, well, I was going to say especially for rural, but maybe especially for like Salt Lake and these counties that are going to have a real water issue or development issue in the future.
Well, you had one of my favorite bills last year, the eminent domain bill. Just one of my favorite bills because it was the twilight zone bill of the year for me.
Right.
A bill that essentially said government cannot use eminent domain to take your property to use for recreation and entertainment. And I saw that bill, I read that bill, and I thought, no brainer. This thing is going to slide through. And next thing I knew, I sat on the dais and I got a whisper, so and so wants this to pass, or wants it defeated. And I'm like, no way. This is a good bill. And I, you did a great presentation, and I thought, there's no way you're going to get opposition to that. And that bill went down in the committee. People actually voted against protecting your personal private property from having the government take it from you to create entertainment venues, recreational venues. And holy cow, I thought this is one of the most like un-American, un-Utah things that I saw happen in a committee, and it was disgusting to me, very frustrating. But it says a lot about you, the kinds of things that you run. You look to protect people's rights, their property rights, their freedom, our federalism at our state level, and that's really who you've been in the public policy arena, and we need that. We need a lot more of you. And so what are your hopes for this session, and what are your fears? Just kind of, we just have a few more minutes here, but what do you hope we get done? What do you hope we make sure doesn't happen?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for that compliment. I hope I'm that person. I hope I can always be that person. And you find out maybe you're ineffective when you're doing that. So, but what do I hope that we can get done in this session? I think we're in the best of all possible circumstances to see just how badly things go if we turn over our jurisdiction to the federal government. It was never intended to be that way. We shouldn't be waiting on every word that comes out of the president's mouth. What's this going to do? Back when John Adams was the president, he was just the president. He didn't have like this crown on his head and this scepter, and if all we have to do is, as a state, say, no, we're not going to do that. And so I think as we see some of these things roll forward, I'm hoping that people will wake up and say, you know what, gosh dang it, we're the legislature. This is our job. This is what we came here to do. We came here to legislate, not to, just be here and kind of push little bills this way and little bills that way, all heading towards this Niagara Falls of over the edge. And at some point we're going to recognize, hey, that's where we're going, and we have the ability to fix it. So that's what I hope we wake up to, awareness of our awful situation.
That's great, because we've never really had things that present and that obvious and that stark of contrasts to help us realize that. Realizing it's the first step. The second step is having courage to do the right thing, And my fear is that sometimes it's the courage that isn't always there. Clearly, the knowledge part is also lacking sometimes, which is why I do this. But you're one of the ones with courage, and you're going to get flack for some of the things you say. I was going to get flack for some of the things I said. You and I got blamed for pushing back on the governor's orders before Thanksgiving, and I don't know what happened to you, but I got a barrage of messages saying, "Thank you for saving Thanksgiving," and I'm like, I really didn't have anything to do with it. But Robert Gerke reported it that way. So I'm like, oh, okay, you're welcome. But Phil Lyman and Kim Coleman were, we were the bad guys that questioned the governor's authority. But we saved Thanksgiving for families.
Well, you're a little bit of a folk hero down in San Juan County. And I'm not sure exactly how you got into that position, but Kim Coleman comes up in a conversation and people applaud because they see you as someone who speaks up, and that's testament to what one person's voice can do if they're willing to speak up. And it's not fun, and you do get marginalized and characterized, but you do it. So
thanks. Well, I think maybe what happened there was an issue came up that around one of my bills that I wasn't aware of. So I told my intern, tell my husband we're taking a trip. And that weekend we drove down and walked the grounds, met the people, read the documents. I learned a lot. First of all, why hadn't I ever been there before? You have some of the most beautiful spaces in that area. Monument Valley. I mean, I'd never been to that. I'd never seen that. And
it is gorgeous. It's amazing. Yeah, beautiful.
So it took me, being called an enemy of a lot of people in that area to go down and discover some amazing things, make some friends along the way, and learn a lot. But, okay, so what do we need to know? What do we need to watch? What do the people need to know? What would you like us to know?
I think we're going to have a pretty good discussion this session about delegation of powers from the legislature to the executive, and Governor Cox in his address to the state said, legislature's they've got to put rails on this. If they want rails on it, they've got to put it on. And to his credit, I think it was a sincere statement. And
he served in the legislature, so I think he has the benefit of having been in two branches of government and understanding both sides from that perspective.
He's the guy that, as a rep, said, "I'll be damned if we're going to let the governor usurp our power." And I think he believes that. So he's looking to the legislature and say, "Hey, if we're having a tug of war, you got to tug. You can't roll over, because this is, I don't know. There's some kind of strange balance of power there, and if one side won't pull, then there's no balance of power." And I think the governor recognizes that, and I think he wants the legislature to step up. And maybe it is adversarial at times, but hopefully it doesn't come across as non-productive adversarial relationship. So I think
tension. I think Speaker Hughes, described it as just that tension, and it should be a good, robust tension.
Right
there.
It's got to be. Yeah, and it gets and it can get dicey, and it can, people can get their feelings hurt. But hopefully, at the end of the day, we all recognize that what we're trying to do is have a better state. And right now, we seem to be like in this really fast motion towards a place we don't want to go. So the best thing I can see is that we'll recognize that. I think the delegation of powers is a big one. These executive orders that are coming down from the federal government, COVID obviously is going to be huge as we watch these things roll out and weaponize businesses to enforce somebody's idea. It's so offensive to me. But we're going to get a chance to see how far they're willing to push that, because they seem to be unrestrained, and hopefully the legislature steps up and says it's just not happening, and the leadership will step up. Anyway.
Hopefully. So counting on you to be part of that, holding the line, pushing back, and that's that has been your that's how you've served us to this point. So I don't expect anything different than Phil Lyman to be defending our freedoms and making sure that our government doesn't get too overstepping in our lives. And thank you for your service. And you travel and to come as far away as you do, and so thank you for your service for these 45 days. And also I like to thank the families too for supporting you, and I miss your wife because you sat behind me, and so I'd always talk to her, and so say hi to her for me. But thanks to the families too for. Oh, is she there? Oh, hi.
Yeah, she's right. Yeah.
So, okay. So
she's here. She's always right close
awesome.
by when I'm doing this, and I do miss you on the floor. I miss your energy and your and just I sat right behind you, and yeah, we've got some great freshmen that have come in. I will say that
you do
really, really great people. So every year you see this new group come in, and it's like there's hope.
And Jordan Tusher was elected to be my representative, and he's doing great so far. So, so he was a great choice. So,
good. Okay.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, Phil, and do good, don't do bad, and rest up. We'll let you go to bed.
That's good advice. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
I appreciate it.
All righty. Well, thank you for joining the Candidly Kim podcast, and where we can be found we're on Rumble. I'm posting on Telegram now. I'm sharing on Telegram. That's a very interesting space. A lot of good conservative stuff happening there. YouTube, Podbean, iTunes.
Join Telegram while you still can.
Yeah, join Telegram till Telegram gets it. So you're going to hear about this probably before this gets published, but look at what Governor DeSantis is doing in Florida regarding deplatforming and free speech. So, we can be a little bit more like Florida on some things. So I don't know if it's too late for our legislature to lead out on some of these things, but DeSantis is making it a crime to act in certain discriminatory ways on some of the platforms and some of the media. So that's great. Let's look at what he's doing and see if we can replicate that here. And
maybe we can annex to Florida.
Annex to Florida, because it's close. It would be Texas before Florida.
Okay.
Texas does state government pretty well too, and South Dakota's been doing some good things. So we can see what's happening there. But anyway, so find us on those platforms. Please share this podcast. Would really love your support, and follow the podcast. And one day we're going to get regular. When we release them, but
someday.
But anyway, a little bit more frequently because I'm mad about some things in the legislature. That tends to get me in front of you. But anyway, so anything else, Doran?
Nope.
All righty. Well, thanks for joining us. Have a good night.